No-till farming has become one of the most repeated, defended, and paradoxically, least questioned agricultural practices in modern agribusiness. At some point over the last few decades, it ceased to be a technique based on clear agronomic criteria and began to function as an operational dogma, something applied automatically, regardless of soil, climate, production systems, or the economic reality of the farm. In 2025, with high production costs, increasingly shorter climate windows, heavier machinery, and constant pressure for maximum yield, the question that must be asked is not whether no-till is good or bad, but whether it is still being applied correctly and if, in every context, it remains the best technical and economic choice. Most producers claim to practice no-till, but few can explain, with data, if the system is delivering the promised benefits or merely masking structural soil problems. The original concept of no-till involves permanent soil cover, minimum soil disturbance, diversified crop rotation, and rigorous control of machinery traffic. However, in current practice, many systems are reduced to simply not using a harrow or plow, maintaining a repetitive succession of cash crops while completely ignoring the physical, chemical, and biological construction of the soil over time. This conceptual deviation has created a false sense of sustainability, while silent degradation processes advance beneath the surface. Subsurface compaction, reduced macroporosity, decreased biological activity, and root growth limitations are increasingly frequent problems in areas calling themselves consolidated no-till. The producer looks at the field, sees straw on the surface, and believes the system is working, but they do not measure water infiltration, evaluate mechanical soil resistance, observe the cultural profile, or monitor actual root system development. In a scenario of climate change, where unpredictable periods of drought and intense rain alternate, the soil's efficiency in storing and providing water has become one of the most critical factors in agricultural productivity. A structurally compromised soil, even under cover, quickly loses its capacity to infiltrate water, increasing surface runoff, erosion, and nutrient loss. No-till, when well managed, should be a powerful tool to mitigate these issues, but when poorly executed, it can become a silent aggravator. Modern mechanization, with increasingly heavier tractors and harvesters, has intensified pressure on the soil, especially when traffic occurs outside ideal moisture conditions. Without rigorous traffic control and planned corrective interventions, compaction accumulates year after year, creating dense layers that drastically limit deep root growth. In many cases, the crop shows good initial development by taking advantage of the more structured surface layer, but quickly enters water stress during dry spells, even when moisture is available in deeper layers that the roots cannot reach. This phenomenon leads the producer to blame the climate for yield drops, when the problem actually lies in the physical soil structure built over the years. In 2025, insisting on a no-till system without monitoring, adjustments, or clear technical criteria has ceased to be a conservationist practice and has become a production risk. Questioning no-till does not mean abandoning it, but rather reclaiming its original logic and adapting it to new technological, climatic, and economic conditions. Modern agronomy demands decisions based on diagnosis, not repeated tradition. The field has changed, the climate has changed, the machines have changed, and the cost of error has never been higher. To ignore this is to treat the soil as an infinite resource, when it is, in fact, the most sensitive and strategic asset of the entire production system. No-till farming only truly works when it stops being an automatic decision and starts being a managed system, handled with the same level of rigor as any other high-cost investment on the farm. The problem is that many confuse the absence of soil disturbance with management quality, as if the simple act of not tilling were enough to guarantee structure, fertility, and productivity over the years. In practice, efficient no-till depends on a set of conditions that must be aligned simultaneously. If just one fails, the system begins to lose efficiency silently. The first pillar is the physical structure of the soil. Soil under no-till must have good macroporosity, poor continuity at depth, and low mechanical resistance to root growth. This doesn't happen by decree, it happens through biological construction and correct management over time. Soils that enter the system already compacted, degraded, or poorly corrected chemically will hardly recover on their own just because straw is present. Without deep roots exploring the profile and intense biological activity, the soil remains structurally limited. The second pillar is crop rotation. Everyone defends it in theory, but almost no one executes it properly. Rotation is not indefinitely alternating soybeans and second crop corn. Real rotation involves functional diversity of root systems, alternating between fibrous and taproot crops, and including species with high biomass production. When rotation is oversimplified, the soil is exploited the same way every time, favoring compaction and depleting biological diversity. The third pillar is permanent soil cover. Straw isn't just for pictures, it regulates soil temperature, reduces evaporation, protects against rain impact, and feeds the microbiota. No-till systems that leave the soil bare for long periods, due to cover crop failure or low biomass, quickly lose their expected benefits. In warmer climates, the lack of cover accelerates organic matter decomposition and intensifies structural degradation. The fourth pillar, often ignored, is machinery traffic control. It is useless to talk about soil conservation while tractors and harvesters roam randomly across the entire area, often in inadequate moisture conditions. Each pass compacts the soil at depth, and in no-till, this compaction is not mechanically corrected. Without traffic planning, the system accumulates problems year after year until physical limitation becomes a clear production bottleneck. The fifth pillar is continuous monitoring. No-till is not a set-it-and-forget-it system. It requires periodic evaluation of the soil profile, water infiltration measurements, and root system observation. Successful producers treat the soil as a living, dynamic organism, adjusting practices based on the system's signals. When all these factors are aligned, no-till delivers consistent results, yield stability, better water use, and resilience against extreme weather. But this requires technical knowledge and discipline, qualities that don't fit with shortcuts. In 2025, the no-till systems that actually work are the minority. Not because the technique is flawed, but because execution demands more than just repeating inherited practices. It demands strategic decisions based on diagnosis. This separates those who use no-till as a tool from those who merely repeat the name. The real damage caused by poorly managed no-till systems rarely shows up as an immediate collapse in yield. Instead, it manifests as a gradual loss of resilience, a silent erosion of the soil's ability to buffer stress, and a steady increase in production costs that many producers mistakenly attribute to climate variability or genetic limitations. In most cases, the system appears functional on the surface. Crop emergence is uniform, residue covers the soil, and early vegetative growth looks acceptable. This visual normality is precisely what allows structural problems to persist undetected for years. One of the most common and damaging issues is subsurface compaction, typically concentrated between 10 and 25 centimeters deep. This zone is critical for root expansion, water movement, and nutrient uptake, yet it often becomes mechanically restricted due to repeated machinery traffic, especially under marginal soil moisture conditions. Because no-till systems do not regularly disrupt this layer, compaction accumulates incrementally, forming a dense barrier that roots struggle to penetrate. Early in the season, plants rely heavily on the upper soil layers, masking the problem. As the crop enters reproductive stages and water demand increases, root systems fail to access deeper moisture reserves, leading to premature stress even when subsoil water is available. Yield losses occur not because water is absent, but because the plant cannot reach it. This dynamic is frequently misdiagnosed as drought sensitivity or poor weather distribution, when in reality it is a structural failure of the production system. Compaction also disrupts soil aeration, reducing oxygen availability in the root zone and impairing microbial activity. Beneficial organisms responsible for nutrient cycling, organic matter stabilization, and aggregate formation decline under these conditions, weakening the biological engine that no-till systems depend on to maintain structure over time. As biological activity decreases, the soil becomes more dependent on mechanical stability, which it no longer has. Another hidden cost emerges in nutrient efficiency. Compacted layers restrict root proliferation, limiting the soil volume explored by plants and reducing the effective uptake of applied fertilizers. Producers respond by increasing application rates in an attempt to compensate, raising costs without addressing the underlying constraint. Over time, this leads to diminishing returns on investment, where higher input levels produce marginal gains at best. Water infiltration is another casualty of degraded no-till systems. While surface residue reduces runoff initially, subsurface compaction limits downward water movement, causing rainfall to accumulate near the surface. During intense precipitation events, this results in saturation, anaerobic conditions, and increased risk of surface runoff despite residue presence. In dry periods, the same soil loses moisture rapidly because its storage capacity has been compromised. The system becomes hydrologically inefficient, unable to manage either excess or deficit effectively. Yield maps often reveal growing spatial variability under these conditions, with high-performing zones shrinking over time while low-performing areas expand. This spatial instability is a strong indicator of structural imbalance, yet it is often ignored or attributed solely to inherent soil differences. The economic impact of these hidden failures compounds year after year. Higher fuel consumption due to increased draft force, greater wear on equipment, rising fertilizer rates, and unstable yields all erode profitability. The producer continues operating under the assumption that no-till automatically equals conservation, while the system quietly drifts away from its original purpose. In 2025, ignoring these signals is no longer a neutral decision. It is a strategic risk. The cost of correcting severe compaction and biological degradation after years of neglect is significantly higher than maintaining system balance proactively. Understanding where and why no-till begins to fail is not an argument against the system itself, but against the assumption that it is self-sustaining. Without diagnostics, adaptation, and occasional corrective intervention, no-till transitions from a soil-building strategy into a yield-limiting constraint that quietly drains both productivity and profitability. By 2025, the production environment surrounding modern agriculture has changed so dramatically that many of the assumptions on which traditional no-till systems were built no longer hold. The equipment is heavier, the operational windows are narrower, climate variability is more aggressive, and the economic tolerance for inefficiency has virtually disappeared. Yet many no-till systems are still managed as if the context were the same as it was 20 or 30 years ago. One of the most critical shifts is the escalation in machine weight. Modern combines, grain carts, self-propelled sprayers, and large tractors exert ground pressures that far exceed those common when no-till was first widely adopted. Even with improved tire technology and tracks, the total axle load has increased substantially. When these machines traffic fields repeatedly, especially under less than ideal moisture conditions, they generate deep compaction that biological processes alone cannot easily reverse. In earlier systems, freeze-thaw cycles, root growth, and soil fauna activity could gradually alleviate moderate compaction. In many regions today, those natural corrective forces are either insufficient or inconsistent, making compaction a cumulative and persistent issue. At the same time, climate patterns have become more erratic. Rainfall events are increasingly concentrated into short, intense periods, followed by longer dry spells. This places enormous pressure on the soil's ability to infiltrate, store, and release water efficiently. No-till systems that lack deep structural continuity struggle under these conditions. During heavy rains, water fails to penetrate compacted layers, increasing surface saturation and runoff. During dry periods, shallow root systems exhaust available moisture quickly, triggering stress long before the crop reaches its genetic yield potential. The margin for error has narrowed. A soil that performs adequately under average conditions may fail completely under extremes, and extremes are no longer rare. Economic pressure further amplifies these risks. Input costs for fertilizers, seeds, fuel, and crop protection have risen sharply, while market volatility has increased uncertainty on the revenue side. In this context, every inefficiency is magnified. Yield losses that might have been absorbed in previous decades now translate directly into financial strain. No-till systems that quietly reduce nutrient efficiency or limit root exploration force producers into a defensive management posture, applying more inputs to compensate for structural limitations rather than generating returns through improved soil function. Another critical shift is the compression of operational windows. Planting and harvest periods are shorter, driven by both climate unpredictability and the scale of modern operations. Producers are often forced to operate under marginal conditions to stay on schedule. In no-till systems without controlled traffic or adaptive strategies, this increases the risk of structural damage precisely when the soil is most vulnerable. The system becomes trapped in a feedback loop. Time pressure leads to compaction, compaction reduces resilience, and reduced resilience increases sensitivity to future stress. Technology has also changed expectations. Precision agriculture, yield mapping, and remote sensing have made variability more visible than ever before. Producers can now see, with uncomfortable clarity, where no-till systems are underperforming. However, visibility does not automatically lead to correction. Without a conceptual framework to interpret these data, variability is often accepted as inevitable rather than diagnosed as a management failure. In 2025, the question is no longer whether no-till can work in principle. It is whether it can be executed at the scale, intensity, and economic pressure of modern agriculture without adaptation. Systems that fail to evolve with these realities risk becoming relics of a different era, applied out of habit rather than effectiveness. The future of no-till depends not on defending it as an ideology, but on redesigning it as a flexible, diagnostic-driven system capable of absorbing the shocks of a far more hostile production environment. For no-till systems to remain economically and agronomically viable in 2025 and beyond, they must transition from a static set of practices into a dynamic management framework built around diagnostics, feedback, and targeted intervention. The era of universal prescriptions is over. Soil systems are too variable, operational pressures too intense, and margins too tight for blanket approaches to succeed consistently. The first and most critical shift is the normalization of diagnosis as a routine management step rather than a corrective response after failure. This means regular assessment of soil physical properties, including bulk density, penetration resistance, aggregate stability, and infiltration rates. These indicators provide early warnings of structural decline long before yield losses become obvious. In many cases, producers only investigate soil structure after years of stagnating productivity, at which point corrective measures are more disruptive and costly. Proactive diagnosis allows for incremental adjustments that preserve system integrity. Another essential evolution is the acceptance that biological processes, while powerful, have limits. Cover crops and root-driven structure formation are foundational to no-till success, but they are not magic. In soils with severe compaction or historical degradation, biological remediation alone may be insufficient within a practical timeframe. Strategic mechanical intervention, applied selectively and based on data, can reset structural constraints without abandoning the principles of conservation. This is not a return to intensive tillage, but a recognition that rigid adherence to minimal disturbance can sometimes undermine the very goals no-till aims to achieve. Targeted subsoiling, strip tillage, or zone-specific remediation can restore root pathways and water movement when executed under the right conditions and followed by biological reinforcement. The key is intentionality. Interventions must be justified by diagnosis, executed precisely, and integrated into a broader soil-building strategy. Crop rotation design also requires a fundamental rethink. Rotations optimized solely for short-term economic return often fail to deliver the functional diversity needed to sustain soil structure under modern pressures. Deep-rooted species, high biomass producers, and crops with contrasting root architectures must be evaluated not just as agronomic tools but as structural engineers within the system. Their value lies as much in the physical and biological services they provide as in their direct market return. In many systems, integrating cover crops or alternative cash crops is no longer optional if long-term productivity is the goal. Traffic management represents another non-negotiable evolution. Controlled traffic farming, once viewed as impractical or overly complex, is increasingly becoming a requirement rather than an option. By confining compaction to designated lanes, the majority of the field remains structurally intact, preserving pore continuity and root access. While implementation requires planning and sometimes equipment modification, the long-term benefits in soil function, fuel efficiency, and yield stability are substantial. In high-intensity no-till systems, uncontrolled traffic is one of the fastest ways to negate years of biological soil building. Precision agriculture tools must also be reframed as diagnostic assets rather than just optimization gadgets. Yield maps, NDVI imagery, and soil conductivity data can reveal patterns of structural limitation when interpreted correctly. Persistent low-yield zones, especially those that worsen under stress conditions, often correlate with physical constraints rather than nutrient deficiencies. Integrating these datasets into soil management decisions transforms precision technology from a monitoring tool into a strategic driver of system redesign. Ultimately, the survival of no-till in 2025 depends on abandoning the idea that conservation systems are inherently low maintenance. They are not. They demand higher levels of observation, decision-making, and adaptability than conventional approaches. When managed with discipline and supported by data, no-till remains one of the most powerful tools for building resilient, productive soils. When managed by habit and ideology, it becomes a liability. The difference lies not in the system itself, but in the mindset governing its execution. The economic performance of no-till systems in 2025 is no longer defined by simple cost comparisons between fuel savings and tillage expenses. It is defined by how effectively the system converts inputs into stable, predictable returns under increasingly volatile conditions. When properly managed, no-till can improve profitability by reducing operational passes, enhancing water use efficiency, stabilizing yields, and protecting the long-term productive capacity of the soil. When mismanaged, it introduces hidden costs that quietly erode margins while giving the illusion of savings. One of the most underestimated economic variables in no-till systems is yield stability. Average yield figures often mask year-to-year volatility, which is a major driver of financial risk. Systems with compromised soil structure tend to perform adequately in favorable seasons but suffer disproportionate losses under stress. These losses are not linear, they compound through increased input use, replanting, and missed market opportunities. In contrast, well-structured no-till soils buffer climatic extremes more effectively, reducing downside risk even if peak yields are not dramatically higher. In high-cost production environments, reducing variability can be as valuable as increasing averages. Input efficiency is another critical factor. Fertilizer response in no-till systems is directly linked to root distribution and soil exploration volume. Compacted or biologically inactive soils limit root access, forcing producers to apply higher rates to achieve the same uptake. This creates a false narrative that no-till requires more fertilizer, when in reality the inefficiency stems from structural constraints. Over time, this dynamic inflates per-unit production costs and reduces return on investment. The same principle applies to crop protection products. Stressed plants are more susceptible to disease and pest pressure, increasing reliance on chemical interventions. Fuel and machinery economics also shift under no-till. While fewer tillage passes reduce direct fuel consumption, compaction-related issues increase draft force during planting and harvest, accelerate equipment wear, and raise maintenance costs. These expenses are rarely attributed to soil management decisions, yet they directly impact the bottom line. Controlled traffic and improved soil structure can significantly reduce these hidden costs, improving overall system efficiency. Labor and timing considerations further influence profitability. No-till systems that are resilient to weather variability provide greater operational flexibility, allowing producers to plant and harvest closer to optimal windows. This flexibility reduces the need for rushed operations under poor conditions, which often lead to mistakes and long-term damage. From a risk management perspective, no-till must be evaluated as part of a broader portfolio of decisions. Its value lies not just in immediate cost reduction, but in preserving optionality under uncertainty. Soils with good structure and biological activity respond more predictably to management adjustments, allowing producers to adapt to market and climate signals with greater confidence. Conversely, degraded systems lock producers into reactive management, where decisions are driven by crisis rather than strategy. Financial analysis of no-till systems should therefore incorporate long-term metrics such as soil asset value, remediation costs, and yield resilience. When these factors are included, the economic case for well-managed no-till strengthens considerably. However, this same analysis exposes the weakness of poorly executed systems, where short-term savings are outweighed by long-term losses. In 2025, profitability is no longer about maximizing output at any cost. It is about optimizing system performance under constraint. No-till remains a powerful economic tool, but only when managed with the same rigor applied to any other high-capital investment. Blind adherence to the system without continuous evaluation is not conservation. It is unmanaged risk. Determining whether no-till is the right system for a specific operation in 2025 requires moving beyond ideological alignment and into structured decision-making grounded in soil diagnostics, climatic context, and operational constraints. The question is not whether no-till is universally good or bad, but whether it aligns with the physical realities of the field and the strategic objectives of the producer. The first step in this evaluation is understanding soil type and inherent limitations. Texture, mineralogy, drainage class, and depth all influence how a soil responds to reduced disturbance. Soils with high clay content and poor natural drainage may be more susceptible to compaction and slow structural recovery under no-till, especially when subjected to heavy machinery. Sandy soils, while less prone to compaction, may struggle to maintain organic matter and moisture without sufficient residue input. Recognizing these baseline characteristics allows producers to anticipate risks and tailor management accordingly. Climate is the second critical variable. Regions with distinct wet and dry seasons, frequent freeze-thaw cycles, or predictable rainfall distribution may support no-till more easily than areas with erratic precipitation and prolonged periods of saturation or drought. In climates where planting and harvest often occur under marginal moisture conditions, the risk of structural damage increases significantly. No-till systems in these environments require additional safeguards, such as controlled traffic, adaptive crop rotations, and contingency plans for mechanical intervention. Ignoring climatic constraints does not make them disappear, it simply shifts their impact into future yield losses. Operational scale and logistics also play a decisive role. Large-scale operations with tight labor availability and narrow operational windows face different trade-offs than smaller, more flexible systems. No-till can enhance efficiency by reducing passes, but it also amplifies the consequences of timing errors. A single poorly timed operation can compromise soil structure across large areas. Evaluating equipment capacity, labor scheduling, and traffic patterns is therefore essential. Systems that cannot realistically control traffic or avoid operations under unfavorable conditions may struggle to maintain long-term soil health under strict no-till. Economic objectives further shape the decision framework. Producers focused on maximizing short-term cash flow may prioritize systems with predictable immediate returns, while those with longer investment horizons may value soil resilience and asset preservation more highly. No-till tends to reward patience and consistency, but only when the system is properly supported. Without a clear understanding of financial goals and risk tolerance, adopting no-till can create misalignment between expectations and outcomes. Data integration is a powerful tool in this evaluation process. Historical yield maps, soil tests, remote sensing imagery, and field observations can reveal patterns that indicate whether no-till is enhancing or constraining performance. Fields that consistently underperform despite adequate fertility and pest management often suffer from physical limitations. Recognizing these signals allows producers to make informed adjustments rather than persisting with a system that is not delivering value. Importantly, the evaluation of no-till should not be binary. Hybrid approaches, combining elements of no-till with targeted disturbance or zone-specific management, may offer superior outcomes in certain contexts. The goal is not purity, but performance. In 2025, successful producers are those who treat production systems as adaptable frameworks rather than fixed doctrines. No-till remains a viable and often advantageous option, but only when its adoption is based on fit rather than fashion. The decision to implement or modify no-till should emerge from a deliberate assessment of soil capability, climate risk, operational capacity, and economic strategy. Anything less is speculation dressed up as sustainability. The future of soil management is increasingly defined by systems that reject absolutes and instead prioritize functional outcomes. The long-standing debate between conventional tillage and strict no-till has created a false dichotomy that limits innovation and traps producers in defensive positions. In reality, the most resilient systems emerging in 2025 are hybrid frameworks that integrate the principles of conservation with the flexibility of targeted intervention. These systems acknowledge that soils are dynamic, historically burdened, and unevenly impacted by modern production pressures. Strategic tillage, when applied with precision and purpose, can serve as a corrective tool rather than a step backward. The key distinction lies in intent and execution. Tillage used reactively, indiscriminately, or routinely undermines soil structure and biological function. Tillage used diagnostically, selectively, and infrequently can restore functionality in zones where biological processes have been overwhelmed. This approach requires abandoning the notion that any mechanical disturbance is inherently destructive. Instead, disturbance must be evaluated relative to the damage already present and the system's capacity for recovery. In compacted zones where root growth and water movement are severely restricted, mechanical loosening can re-establish poor continuity and enable biological rebuilding. Without this reset, cover crops and microbial activity may never fully penetrate the constrained layer, leaving the system locked in a degraded state. Hybrid systems also leverage spatial variability rather than fighting it. Zone management allows producers to apply different strategies within the same field based on soil condition, topography, and performance history. High-functioning areas may remain under strict no-till, while degraded zones receive targeted intervention followed by aggressive biological reinforcement. This spatial differentiation maximizes return on investment by focusing resources where they are most needed. Advances in precision agriculture have made this level of management increasingly feasible, reducing the cost and complexity of implementation. Another defining feature of future-oriented systems is the integration of cover crops as functional components rather than symbolic gestures. Species selection is driven by specific objectives, such as deep compaction alleviation, nitrogen scavenging, or surface residue production. Mixtures are designed to deliver complementary root architectures and growth patterns, accelerating structural recovery and enhancing biological diversity. In hybrid systems, cover crops are not expected to solve all problems alone, but to consolidate gains made through targeted mechanical correction. Timing also becomes a critical variable. Strategic tillage is most effective when soil moisture conditions are optimal, minimizing smearing and maximizing fracture. Poor timing can exacerbate compaction rather than alleviate it, reinforcing the need for planning and discipline. Hybrid systems demand higher management intensity, but they also offer greater control over outcomes. They replace ideological rigidity with adaptive decision-making. In 2025, sustainability is no longer measured by adherence to a single practice, but by the system's ability to maintain productivity, resilience, and environmental integrity under stress. Pure no-till may still be appropriate in certain contexts, but it is no longer the default solution. The future belongs to systems that can evolve, respond, and self-correct. Hybrid soil management is not a compromise. It is a recognition that complexity requires flexibility, and that long-term conservation depends on function, not labels. The environmental narrative surrounding no-till has become one of its strongest selling points, often framed around carbon sequestration, erosion control, and sustainability credentials. While these outcomes are possible, they are not automatic, and in 2025 the gap between narrative and reality has become increasingly important to address. No-till systems can contribute to improved environmental performance, but only when they are functionally effective. A poorly managed no-till field with compacted soil, shallow root systems, and declining biological activity may meet the formal definition of reduced disturbance, yet fail to deliver meaningful environmental benefits. Carbon sequestration, for example, is frequently cited as a key advantage of no-till. However, carbon accumulation depends on the balance between organic matter inputs and decomposition, as well as the soil's capacity to physically protect carbon within aggregates. In compacted or structurally degraded soils, aggregate formation is limited, reducing the soil's ability to stabilize organic carbon. Surface residue alone does not guarantee long-term sequestration if below-ground processes are constrained. In some cases, carbon gains plateau or even reverse when root growth is shallow and microbial communities are stressed. This reality challenges simplistic assumptions that no-till automatically equates to climate mitigation. Erosion control is another commonly highlighted benefit. Residue cover does reduce surface erosion under many conditions, but subsurface limitations can undermine this advantage. Compacted layers restrict infiltration, increasing runoff during intense rainfall events despite residue presence. The result is a system that appears protected but still loses water, nutrients, and soil structure during extreme weather. True erosion resistance depends on both surface cover and internal soil porosity. Without the latter, the environmental performance of no-till is incomplete. Nutrient losses also deserve scrutiny. Inefficient root systems and reduced biological activity can increase reliance on surface-applied fertilizers, elevating the risk of runoff and volatilization. In such systems, nutrient use efficiency declines, undermining both economic and environmental goals. Conversely, well-structured no-till soils with active biology and deep rooting profiles can significantly reduce nutrient losses by improving uptake and retention. This contrast highlights a critical point: environmental outcomes are emergent properties of system function, not guaranteed features of a practice label. Sustainability metrics that focus solely on input reduction or disturbance avoidance risk rewarding form over function. In 2025, regulatory frameworks and market-driven sustainability programs are increasingly demanding measurable outcomes rather than assumed benefits. This shift places pressure on producers to demonstrate performance, not just compliance. Hybrid and adaptive systems that deliver real improvements in water management, nutrient efficiency, and soil resilience may outperform rigid no-till systems in these evaluations, even if they include occasional mechanical intervention. The environmental credibility of no-till therefore hinges on honesty and nuance. Defending the system as universally beneficial weakens its legitimacy when evidence of failure emerges. A more robust narrative acknowledges variability, embraces diagnostics, and prioritizes outcomes over ideology. Sustainable agriculture is not defined by the absence of action, but by the effectiveness of action. No-till can be part of that future, but only when it is implemented as a living system rather than a static badge of virtue. So, does no-till still make sense in 2025? The honest answer is yes, but only when it is treated as a management system rather than a belief system. No-till remains one of the most powerful frameworks available for building resilient soils, stabilizing yields, and reducing long-term risk, but its effectiveness is entirely conditional. It depends on soil type, climate, operational discipline, diagnostic rigor, and the willingness to adapt when the system stops delivering. In its original form, no-till was never meant to be a hands-off approach. It was designed as an integrated strategy that combined residue management, crop diversity, traffic control, and continuous observation. Over time, that complexity was diluted into a simplified rule: do not disturb the soil. In 2025, that simplification has become the system's greatest weakness. Modern agriculture operates under pressures that demand precision, flexibility, and accountability. Systems that cannot self-correct or respond to stress quickly become liabilities. No-till succeeds when it is embedded within a culture of measurement. Producers who regularly evaluate soil structure, root development, water movement, and yield stability can identify early signs of decline and intervene before losses compound. They understand that occasional corrective action does not invalidate the system, but strengthens it. In contrast, producers who treat no-till as a fixed identity often ignore warning signals until performance deteriorates beyond easy repair. The future of soil management is not about choosing sides between tillage and no-till. It is about choosing outcomes. Productive soils must infiltrate water efficiently, support deep root systems, sustain biological activity, and deliver consistent returns under uncertainty. Any system that achieves those outcomes is valid. Any system that fails to do so, regardless of its label, must be reconsidered. In this context, no-till remains relevant not because it avoids disturbance, but because it encourages long-term thinking. It shifts attention from immediate field appearance to underlying function. When paired with modern diagnostics, precision tools, and adaptive management, it can outperform more aggressive systems both economically and environmentally. When applied blindly, it becomes indistinguishable from neglect. The producers who will succeed in the next decade are those who abandon absolutes and embrace responsibility for system performance. They will use no-till where it works, modify it where it struggles, and replace it where it fails. This is not a rejection of conservation agriculture, but its maturation. In 2025, the question is no longer whether no-till is the right answer. The question is whether it is being asked correctly.